Using document databases with TYPO3 Flow is the topic of my talk. If you look at the website, there is actually the description for the workshop that was scheduled for Sunday as this description for the talk. So obviously I'm not expecting everyone to get out the laptop now and code along, so it will be a bit more, well, bird's eye this time. Well, yeah, probably a lot of people have seen this slide for a few times. I brought in new bullet point graphics and a few more line breaks, but I'm basically, those of you remembering this slide from last year, yes, last year I got my age wrong, so it's not that that years are longer for me, it's just now it's correct. Alright. Persistence basics, those working with Flow are probably thinking, oh yeah, well, I know that, it's using Doctrine. Yes, that's true. Still, let's take a look at how this actually is implemented on a block level, because it helps understanding the problems that you might currently have if you want to use a document database. And it also helps understanding how that will be improving in 2.2 or 3.0, depending on how non-breaking we can make it. So it uses Doctrine to the ORM, because if you look at the Doctrine project, in the beginning it was just an active record implementation, and then they brought up this ORM thing, so they created the Doctrine ORM. But they also have the database abstraction layer, and they had a package called Doctrine Common, which we are also using. By now they have Doctrine CouchDB, CouchDB ODM, MongoDB, MongoDB ODM, OrientDB ODM, and they have an OXM package. They have split things out of the common package, so they have Doctrine annotations, Lexa, whatnot. So if you check your list of installed Composer packages on a Flow master install, you will see that there's an impressive list of dependencies that is sort of pulled in through our dependency on the Doctrine ORM. So if you ever wonder if Composer was a good idea, yes, it was, because you don't want to manage that on your own. So what we're having is we have Flow on the top of all that. Then we have the Doctrine ORM, which uses the Doctrine database abstraction, which in turn can use native drivers or the PDO driver in PHP, and then it talks to a bunch of databases. That's probably not a big surprise. The thing is, we have this persistence manager in place, and well, we can probably argue over a beer or White Russian or whatever, whether this was a good idea to have that in the beginning. But it just, felt natural to have this centralized persistence manager. And that is sort of, on top of that, what you're interfacing with mostly is the repositories. The problem of sorts that we have currently is that when you inject a persistence manager interface, obviously you just inject an interface, so there's no way for you to decide, okay, this time I want that implementation, this time I want that implementation. You can change that in your objects configuration, but it's just, you have only one. And in the usual case with Flow, what you have is you have actually an instance of the Doctrine Persistence Manager, which is tightly coupled to the Doctrine ORM. So, hopefully you're clever enough and a clean coder, and you only use your repositories. You might be using the default or the standard repository, or you might be extending the Doctrine repository directly because you need DQL queries to be run or whatever. But your application code is only talking to the repositories, hopefully, because that makes things a lot easier for you in the future. And those repositories then again talk to the persistence manager. So this is sort of the line between your code, because you're coding the repositories, or at least the specialized stuff, and the framework part of life. This is a bit simplified because actually those repositories, sometimes it's also that the persistence manager might be talking to a repository, or you might be doing things directly here, or the framework will use the persistence manager directly without asking a repository, so it's a little bit more complicated than that, but that should do for now. The good thing about the way we integrate it, well, basically the good thing about how Doctrine is built, is that your models don't need to know about persistence. So there's 2 or 3 raised eyebrows, okay? So they do not know a lot about persistence internals necessarily. Of course you need to know about your persistence. Even if you had the ideal ORM, it would still be good for you and your application's performance to know approximately how it is working internally, so you can, optimize at the right points. But the beauty for you as a coder is that obviously your properties, you just annotate them with some fancy annotations that you need anyway in Flow. Your relations are, you do them on the PHP level, and then you put in an annotation here and an annotation there, and then it works. So that's nice. You rarely have to tell Flow more than that, so you don't have to tell it about specific column types in the database, or I need this index of 2 columns in the database, and that needs to reference that foreign key, because there isn't a database when it comes to the high-level view. So I guess that's all pretty much, you've seen or wrote, you've written code like that, I guess. So then every once in a while someone comes up and says, yeah, but what about this NoSQL thing and document databases? And yes, of course, they have their place. I mean, relational data is probably best put into a relational database. That's the name suggests that somehow. But then you have also cases where you have a different kind of data that you need to store, and that's where document databases come in. They have some advantages, not for every use case, but for some, and then they are pretty powerful. So if you have data that is more or less schema-less, then a document database can be really helpful, because you do not need to create table inheritance or monster tables. I don't know. It would take too long now to find out who of you has the TYPO3 installation with the most columns in TT content, but, I guess you get the problem. So those document databases usually scale well, often because they do some, they step back on some aspects of ACID compliancy to make it faster. And they're really good for non-relational data, because usually relations, you don't have foreign keys in document databases, so that's a bit, if you're a security freak, maybe, it depends on your sense of security. Of course, you still have some mapping going on, because you have still your objects in memory when you're doing PHP coding, so you need to somehow map. You don't have an object relational mapping anymore. So yeah, but now what you have is a new problem, and that's object document mapping. That often is a bit easier, because most of those databases just accept JSON, and then you just take your object and you do JSON encode and store it. Almost as simple as that. And then those coming from an SQL background, they go like, so I just put the JSON in there, and then I can query it, and all the properties are there, and I can just, No, I cannot do that? Why? What do you mean map reduce? What's a view? Oh, I know a view, but I don't need a view. I can just do a select, order by, group by. No, you can't do that. So some databases, document databases, do that better than others, but generally, it's not as easy as you might wish it to be. And then you have the problem, of course, choosing which database. For relational databases, if you're rich, you go for Oracle. If you are working on a Windows-based internet, you go for SQL Server. If you are going for anything, you do MySQL, and if you are coming from if you still remember your database courses at university, you will probably want to use Postgres and end up using MySQL anyway. So, because they are all the same. I mean, let's face it. With document databases, it's a lot more complicated because they have some really different characteristics. So which one is the right one for you depends on a lot of factors. Two of the more, prominent ones are MongoDB and CouchDB. There's a very nice website giving a thorough overview of the main characteristics of, I think, 12 different document databases. And from that website, which I mentioned down here, I took those two descriptions for Mongo and Couch. So that shows that there is a difference that actually affects the way you work. So choose your database carefully. Now, for the remainder of this talk, I will focus on CouchDB because it is one of the widespread products. So a lot of you have probably heard about it, maybe using it already. What CouchDB, it stores documents as JSON, so it's easy to also, look into it without any tools involved. It provides a REST interface, so that's an easy way to interact with it. And one of its stronger points is the replication and the writes not blocking reads in the database. So it's really also a fast thing to have. Another nice thing about it, compared to Mongo, for example, is Futon, which is a built-in admin UI for CouchDB. It does all the basic stuff that you need. You can create databases, documents, views, designs, query them. Couch can run applications completely standalone, Couch apps. So that's really nice. And it's also, for the party people, it's a really nice system because, you cannot see that because this thing is standing in front of it. But down on the right side, Futon says, welcome to admin party. So, because everyone is admin if you install it without any changes. So, it's a nice and friendly system. It has a REST API, so you can talk to it using curl. You can create a database. You can create documents which get an ID assigned, and you can fetch documents. That's really an easy thing. That's a little bit of duplication. So the intention of this slide was to remove the text at the top because we had that already. And the important stuff is at the bottom, which is if you are using curl on the command line to do interactive things with REST services or with any other thing, don't do it. Give HTTPy a try, which is a really nice tool that gives you color-coded results. So if you're really looking at the output of some REST service using curl and you have this endless lines of JSON on screen, don't do that anymore. Try HTTPy. It's really good. Here you can actually see it. So it's an unfair comparison, right? And still, if you use HTTPy in a script, for example, and you pipe it to some other command, it will not do the color coding and will behave like curl. So it's really a drop-in replacement. And if you need more background on CouchDB, of course, read the guide. You can buy it as a book, or you can read the draft version on the internet for free. You can support the project by reporting bugs and providing patches to the book, which is really nice. And then of course there's the docs, the official documentation, which is more the technical details. So the thing is, how do you use that? Those of you who have been following Flow for a long time and are still Flow 3 might remember the generic persistence. So one way is, you can change the persistence manager implementation as mentioned. So one approach that does that is the TYPO3 CouchDB package. It was developed, I think we started 2.5 years ago or something by now, so it's really quite a long-running thing. Was started for Rossmann by network teams, Christopher and me, in some frantic hacking day, and then Christopher continued working on it and brought it a long way, really. So what it does, it fully replaces the Doctrine Persistence Manager with another one based on CouchDB. The model annotations all stay the same, so you just have entity and all the fields and stuff, so that's pretty painless, not a lot of new things to learn. And what it even does is provides a basic mapping of the query object model to automatically generated views. So you can query Couch without having to write views and MapReduce queries for, well, the basics and the intermediate complex quantum queries. Right now this is not working with Flow, so, right? Or do you have it ported forward? Yeah, so it's working for Flow 3.1.1, but not for TYPO3 Flow. I did some first, I took out a knife and stabbed it a few times, so at least it doesn't produce any errors in the compile phase anymore, but I didn't test it really. So we might bring it up to speed for Flow, or not, depending on how the other stuff evolves. But still, let's have a look at it. Obviously, because it's Flow 3 based, it doesn't have a composer package. It's not on packages or whatever. So yeah, you just clone it from the TYPO3 org Git server, and then you configure it. The actual swapping of the persistence is done by the package itself. So you just give the almost usual options in the persistence configuration. Because it is replacing the persistence manager, it's just the same backend options thing. So you have a data source name in this case. You have some new stuff like enabling CouchDB Lucene queries, which you can switch on and off. So that's pretty straightforward. And when it comes to using it, well, yeah, you just extend the basic Flow repository, or Flow 3 repository in that case, and you can just, as you can see here, you can be using indexes, which is a little different. But you can use the basic QAM stuff like matching query like name, $name, and you will get the results back that match this query. You can have it work with Lucene indexes in Couch, so you need to configure that obviously at some point, and then you just do this, you create or you extend a Lucene index class that's coming with a package, and you so index this property and that property and that property, and then later on you can use that for querying. And then the design docs, MapReduce queries and views and everything, you need to configure that somehow, because automatic creation of views only gets you to a certain point, and afterwards it will either produce something that's not working or that's really performing badly. So you can define views by implementing a view interface that we have, or by configuring a query view which is there already, so you can do that setting space to a certain degree. And then you can also define design documents by extending a class that has a very easy set of methods to implement, where you more or less return the JavaScript that should go into Couch. So now for some bad news. Obviously, with that package comes a slide that you've seen already, unfortunately. It only supports Couch, because it's called TYPO3 CouchDB, and it talks to CouchDB directly. So that's the one drawback. You're not going to have MongoDB running with that package. And also, this one backend at a time rule still applies. Because obviously, if you switch out the persistence manager from the ORM one to a CouchDB based one, you gain Couch but you lose ORM. So there's no parallel use of Couch and MySQL in such a setup. Because, as I said, this persistence manager usually is tied to Doctrine. or in that case to Couch. It's just, you know, one backend supported. Of course, you can work around that because your repositories are the central place your application code fetches and stores data, right? So in your repository, obviously what you can do is, even if you're using the CouchDB package, you can just open a MySQL connection directly and do dirty things. You could, I don't know, read CSV files or whatever. As long as you return what the repository interface mandates, your code will work regardless of the actual implementation inside your repository. So we had one project pretty early on in the life of Flow 3 where someone used Solr to, you know, do all the searching and would fetch UUIDs from the Solr and then go back to the regular ORM to fetch the actual objects defined by those IDs you found through Solr. What you can also do is just instantiate another Doctrine entity manager with different connection parameters to have more than one database usable at the same time during one request. That's also something you can do. You can do some more advanced things, and you can be inspired by a package that we'll be looking at now. The main thing is you need to encapsulate. So, and if you want to do that, there's some good news because someone did that already. So Rens, he's also here, over in the corner. So if you want to thank him for that or slap him, depending on your experience with the project, he's available. But with slapping, be careful. He's he's one of the tall guys, so you might lose. So this package, well, it started or is developed for two projects that were running in parallel and had more or less the same needs or similar needs. And it started as an extension to the TYPO3 CouchDB package we've already seen. So then there were a few dead ends, so Rens started refactoring it based on Doctrine to CouchDB ODM. And, applause, this one can be used alongside the existing ORM in Flow. So you have two worlds already. You just need to make sure that if you go to GitHub to check it out and just to look at the code, switch to the right branch, because master is not what you want in this case. So you need the Doctrine branch. This is a composer-ified package. It's not on packages because it is sort of an intermediate solution and is sort of bound to go away. So you need to define a repository in your Composer manifest to install it. Everything about handling Composer stuff in your Flow project, you can learn that later today, I guess, in the talk by Christian Jensen on Composer. I think it's today or tomorrow. You'll be here anyway. 5 today, okay. So drink a bit more coffee and stay awake. It will be important and interesting. So, and then again, make sure that you use the right branch in your Composer manifest to pull in the ODM-based stuff. Configuration is a bit different because the usual configuration still applies for the ORM part. And then you have some new options for the CouchDB package, which gives you the option to define a database name in your Couch server, and username and password and blah blah blah. If you ever wonder why the CouchDB package or the CouchDB driver of Doctrine supports IP and host, and why both are not described properly in the documentation, if you're using the socket client to connect, which is the default for this package, and which is the recommended one, it is only using the IP and not the host. It uses the IP exclusively, so setting the host parameter doesn't change anything to your connection in that case. The other driver is using the host for the connection, but using the IP for the error message, so that can be very confusing. Obviously in this case there's some new annotations coming along because this one knows about, oh, that's a document database, it is a little different. It It doesn't store entities, it stores documents. So we are using just the annotations that the Doctrine CouchDB package provides, which is ODM document, and you can make it indexed or not. And you need to, for Couch, you need to actually have an ID property in your model, so it knows a bit more about the internals of the persistence. So there are some new annotations, and it's you actually have, if you ever need to use ODM column in your models now, you might be needing ODM field in this setup, and you can mark properties as indexed and everything. So, but most of this will not be different from now, or not radically different. Your repositories, in this case, are extending not the default Flow repository, but the abstract repository in the CouchDB package. From there on, it's pretty simple, because you still have a create query method, which in this case takes a design document name as the first parameter, and a constraint name as the second parameter if you need one, and you can give a type. But basically you have execute method on the query, and you get a query result back. Depending on your type, if you do native, it's a bit different than if you do Lucene index queries. And so there's a bit to learn, but I mean, it's still, you encapsulate it in your repository, and it will work out fine. And you can also use the more advanced things that CouchDB provides. You can, if you have your composite keys in your result, you can set the group level for returning the results. So you can set the limit. So this is really powerful and easy at the same time, I dare to say. Now, views and design documents are even easier because, well, basically it's just JavaScript. So you just need to put them in the right places. So if you look back at this one, so we are giving this the name most recent, so that's just an identifier. And looking at the next thing, you see that, oh yeah, we have datasets and we have a most recent view defined. So this is the one that I'll be using for the query, and the package will just, import those definitions into your CouchDB server whenever you would also be migrating an ORM schema, for example. So, has anyone actually tried to connect a Flow application to Couch or to Mongo or whatever? Okay, so you? Yeah, well, you two are sort of the... so it's some crazy core team members and the Indian guys. So, what is it with the other European people that they don't, I mean, whatever. I thought there was some hot topic, anyway. So, for those of you, actually using it, some even better news. Because, as you've seen, it is possible to use multiple backends at the same time. I mean, what Rens did there is some mixture of, well, yes, you can do whatever you like in your repository, and sprinkle it with some AOP magic and a signal here and a slot there. So it's a bit more advanced. But still, it gives you only one ORM and one CouchDB connection at the same time. What about, yeah, well, I need to connect to the Flow database as usual, and then I have this ODM thing for accumulating the statistics. But I then also have this Oracle database that I need to fetch this very specific data from. So wouldn't it be cool if you could have really multiple backends in parallel? Wouldn't that be cool? Well, whatever. You can stick to your single MySQL server. I mean, I don't need to finish that, so that's a different story. So currently we have this persistence manager, and that's talking to the repositories only in the future. Currently what you have is that even if you are talking to your repositories exclusively, the property mapping might be asking the persistence manager directly for some objects, because it only knows the ID and it doesn't know necessarily if there is a repository for it and which one is it and all that. So it's a bit mixed. What the future will bring is that even if you ask the persistence manager for anything, it will in turn find the correct repository responsible for a certain type, and we'll ask that one. And what then the repository will do is it talks to the actual implementation of the persistence backend, so to the ORM, or to the MongoDB, or to Couch, or to whatever. And what this gives you is, you can have, I don't know, 2 MySQL connections open, and another Postgres documentation, database connection open at the same time, if that is needed by your application. So you can have multiple ORM connections, or you can have different types. You can have a MySQL and a MongoDB connection open. Or you can mix that even further and say, yeah, we need 2 ORM connections and a MongoDB connection, and also the Couch for the statistics collection. And you know, you get the point. You can just sort of scale it up. For this, we need to extend the configuration a bit, but I'm pretty sure that we can get that done in a backwards compatible way. So if you're just using ORM, then you just configure it like you do now. You just set the database connection parameters and you're done. But there will be a way to define multiple sets of connection parameters for different backends or persistence mechanisms, and you can then in some way refer to them using an identifier. So there will be new things coming, but no breaking changes in that regard when it comes to configuration. Then what's really important is the consistency in using different backends. It is of no use if you say, yeah, I need a document database, but it's so radically different coding models for this than it is for coding against the ORM, that you really need to decide early on in the project which one to use. And if you do the wrong decision, then you can have a hard time going back and changing it again, because it needs recoding all of the models. So the annotations, we will do what we did for the ORM as well. If possible, we just pre-populate any field annotations that you might need with what we know from the var annotations already. So it's really, it should feel as if you were using Flow like it was before. You just code your model and just, you don't annotate it with entity but with document, and ideally that's all you need to do. What's also important is that all the result interfaces are the same, so you still get clear result interface instances back. So you can just, your client code doesn't need to care. You can just change the repository implementation, and then it will do, it will continue working. One hot topic is, of course, if you split your data over multiple databases, even if it was the same type, you have a hard time doing joins. I mean, you cannot join over 2 servers. There's just no way in SQL to say, yeah, and then left join this other server. You just cannot do that. But still, people expected that even 5 years ago when we had the database abstraction in TYPO3 4.0 for the first time. So people were like, oh yeah, but what about joins if I now map this to a different table in an Oracle database? So, how do you expect that to work? With document databases, it becomes more critical even, because obviously what you're now doing is you're not only saying, yeah, I have this legacy database there, which I also need to tie in somehow, but you're really saying, okay, I have all this data that is at the heart of my application, but I know that for this specific model, using CouchDB is just a better choice than putting it into Postgres. But still, there's a strong connection between those data sets and those instances to something else in the system. So while you can always do and say, yeah, well, I just remember the type and the ID of some other type or object, and then I do initialize object, and if it is a reconstitution, then you just fetch it from the other repository and populate it and stuff. That means a lot of manual work that you need to do as a coder, and so there are some ideas floating around how to work around this. Some of that has been implemented already in this CouchDB package that Rens did, but we need to sort of really make sure that it works for all the cases. If we enable some automagic connection across persistence backends, obviously it needs to be really safe, sound, and working all the time. And if it's not, then we're probably just skipping that for the first round at least, and then go back to it later. So the current state is that this sort of package, or this intermediate solution that Renz created is working well. The problem is that we want to integrate it into Flow. It might still be a separate package that you need to install, because there's a limit to what you can put into one framework, sort of monolithically. So because if we then add 5 other database instances or implementations, at some point you will say, yeah, well, but I don't need all that. Why do I need to download it over and over again? So it might be a separate package, but it needs to be integrated tightly into Flow. The whole annotation driver thing needs to be done right. So there's still some work missing to integrate that really. So far, this ODM integration has been worked on, done, made real, and made possible through support in the form of paid work time and unpaid work time or whatever, by a company called Beach IT from the Netherlands, by the BKVE, which is a statistics gathering thing related to the Dutch government, by Renz Admiral, by myself, and then of course, since all this is based somehow on the early work also by Christopher in a sense, so because we are it was based on that to some degree. So thank me and thank them. So, but as I said, there's more work needed. So if you have experience to spare, if you have a workforce to spare, or if you have money to spare, just get in touch with me or with anyone from the core team, basically, because it will be routed to the right people anyway. And tell us about your needs and your intentions to help, and we'll work out something to get this project really done and to the end.